Hello everyone, welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfic. Today I'll be continuing with the Yuuei Survival Guide. This will be Part 5, Chapter 5. Monday morning, Izuku arrived at school early like he's told his sensei he was going to. Aizawa was already in their homeroom classroom, sitting behind the desk, when Izuku pushed the door open slowly. He wasn't as early as he'd been the day that he'd come looking for a recovery girl, but it was still a good 45 minutes until class would start. He breathed a sigh of relief at seeing his teacher already waiting for him. Turns out Aizawa-sensei had already made a general schedule. Monday and Friday mornings before school, the teacher regarded him with lidded eyes, and Wednesday after school. I'm also willing to work with you on Saturday or Sunday as well. The weekend training is optional. Rest is important, but I'm willing to blur the line a little in hopes of catching you up with the rest of the class in a timely manner. It's illogical to let you flounder in class when we could put a bit of extra effort in to help catch you up, but still, the decision is yours, Midoriya. I'd like to train on the weekend as well, Sensei. I don't like being so behind everyone else. They're all so powerful already, and I can hardly activate my quirk without injuring myself. Very well. Sensei gives a light nod. I've set the dates, so you pick whether you'd prefer Sunday or Saturday. Training will take place here at school, since it's the safest place for me to monitor you, and you're already familiar with the area. Yes, Sensei, Izuku gives a steady nod. We'll do no more than 4 training sessions per week, and I will not budge on that. I don't want you to burn out, truthfully. This is already more training than I'm already comfortable allowing. You'll be training in the class as well, but I've had students like you, and I know you idiots won't just not practice because you've been asked not to, so I'll feel better about knowing I'm there to end the training should I see you overworking yourself or practicing to the point that it's dangerous. That was fair. Truth be told, if he had somewhere he could practice without fear of harming someone or something, or even himself, he would be. One for all was powerful, and the sooner he got a handle on it, the easier his life would be. But that meant trial and error, and there wasn't a space for either trial or error when it came to one for all. If Aizawa-sensei hadn't have offered these sessions, Izuku would have had to look for some condemned building or secluded location where he could train, maybe even to Goba Beach. Additionally, his sensei continued after a moment's pause, Hound Dog has agreed to morning or after-school counseling, alternating your schedule with me. I suggested 2 sessions a week, but 1 minimum would suffice. Hero work is harrowing, though, keeping your mental health in mind, Midoriya. Of course, the teenager nodded, so hard that his curls fell into his eyes. His sensei eyed him for a second, before returning to a calmer nod. Now, we don't usually allow sessions outside of school hours, but you are a special case. In that regard, Hound Dog's schedule is relatively open for you to choose and pick when you'll want to spill your guts, since this is a rare and sensitive situation, and he's a bit worried about you. The teenager can't resist snorting a laugh at his teacher's choice of words. He sobers almost immediately, thumb and index finger coming up to cradle his chin thoughtfully. So I'm doing morning quirk training with you on Monday and Friday, and after-school training on Wednesday. Could I do quirk counseling in the morning on Tuesday and Thursday? Or is it alternating, meaning if I could work with you in the mornings and have the option to work with Hound Dog after school on that same day? Izuku pauses, chews on the inside of his cheek before looking back at his teacher. Either or, but if that's what you want, I'm sure Hound Dog wouldn't mind. Sensei shrugged, leaning back in his chair. Are you up for coming early every day of the week besides Wednesday? Counseling would be roughly an hour-long session, and quirk training is at least an hour, depending on your endurance and control. I don't want you spreading yourself too thin, kid. It's only the 3rd week of school. I won't, Izuku shakes his head, grinning widely. I'm up early anyways. This will just give me something to do. And there's an earlier train in the morning that I can swap to, so it works out perfect. Your mother won't mind all this extra training? No. The boy forces a grin that he thinks may be a bit too forced to look natural. His teacher scans his face, eyebrows furrowing, but doesn't question it further. Izuku refuses to look away from his teacher's gaze, and instead lets his smile waver into something less forced. She won't mind, Sensei, I promise. All right, the man sighs out. I'll run this by Hound Dog and introduce you to him tomorrow morning if everything goes to plan. We'll start our training on Wednesday after school. Come find me tomorrow morning. Okay, Izuku grins, and this time it's completely honest. Thank you again, Sensei. I hope I meet your expectations. I'll work hard to earn my place in 1A. I'm sure you will, his teacher drawls, but there's a fondness in the look that he's trying to mask. He seems to catch it himself, clearing his throat and glancing away. Problem child. Izuku's grin just widens in return. Now get lost, find a friend or something. I've got stuff to do. We have a busy day today, so be prepared for that. Don't be late." "Yes, Sensei." Izuku's smiling so hard that his vision blurs as his eyes squint. He wonders briefly how Oboro can handle the loss of vision every time he grins this widely. It is his trademark smile. He probably has practice. The student leaves the room without another word, knowing he'll see his sensei again in the next little while. He's excited for whatever activity is planned, a bounce in his step as he softly rolls the door shut behind him. He can't wait. Izuku's excited for rescue training. He's almost vibrating on the bus as they travel to wherever the training will be held. Aizawa-sensei doesn't seem to mind them chatting, his eyes closed, but Izuku's almost positive that he's not asleep. The group takes the travel time, where there's nothing of importance to be doing, in stride, getting to know each other a little bit more. Izuku doesn't really focus on what's being said around him, besides the fact that Kacchan is on the receiving end of being teased, and Izuku is being left alone. The imbalance of it makes Izuku's insides feel mushy and uncertain, but he's also thankful the sole attention isn't on him. Oboro had tagged along, but was standing by Aizawa-sensei instead of tucked in beside Izuku. He was sitting almost shoulder to shoulder with his classmates, after all. Oboro doesn't actively try to phase through living people, unless the living beings are Izuku, Aizawa-sensei, and probably most often, Present Mike. Izuku has come to realize that when Oboro's not annoying him, he's probably annoying Present Mike-sensei. He very rarely does anything more than stand beside Aizawa-sensei, though. When they arrive, Aizawa-sensei leads them off the bus, entirely giving up on keeping them organized as they pull outside and stare up in awe at the building. They notice that Pro Hero 13 is waiting for them. He knows, rationally, he'd seen her in the teacher's lounge on Friday, but in his defense, he'd been trying not to throw up. Now he can be excited, though. He's sure that his face is lax with a dumb starstruck expression on it. Oboro snickers behind him, and the thing that snaps him out of his awe is a finger phasing through his cheek. He jolts away from the chill, momentary disgust on his face because Oboro's finger had been in his mouth before subtly glaring daggers at the grinning ghost. "Was afraid you'd start drooling, Izu," was Oboro's only response, shoulder arching in a playful shrug. The green-haired boy could only roll his eyes to convey his annoyance, attention landing back on 13. She'd been talking, he realizes, she and his classmates, and he's missed some of it, but at least no one had seemed to notice him being weird as he's playfully bullied by a dead Yuuei student who also happens to be one of his closest friends now. 13 leads them into the building, and Izuku's jaw gapes in open awe once again. It's so cool. He thought the gym at the school was amazing, but this was incredible. Around him, excited cheer chatters through and fills the air, and 13 pridefully introduces all the terrain replicas enclosed in the building. And Kirishima's right, this place really does look like an amusement park. His excitement only seems to bubble up even more as he stands there listening. A shipwreck, a landslide, natural disasters, it's just all so cool. This USJ might even be cooler than Universal Studios Japan. Izuku barely even notices as Aizawa-sensei steps to speak with 13 away from them. He looks around for All Might, who sensei had told them would be teaching along today as well. Izuku's under the impression that All Might is being kept on a tight leash under supervision from his own pro teacher as he peers after the battle training mishap. He doesn't see the bulking man anywhere, but he's only sad about it for a second before he's once again reminded that he's going to be training here today. So awesome. Izuku pays vivid attention as 13 explains what they're going to be doing. She talks of Aizawa-sensei's quirk, apprehension test, and even All Might's battle simulations. Izuku knows One for All could be deadly. He's still learning to not harm himself when using it. But after her pep talk, he's more fired up than ever. He wants to help people. He wants to rescue. He'll work hard to learn his quirk so that he can be the hero he's desperate to become. So he can use it for good like All Might has been for so long. Around him, all his classmates seem to be fueled up in similar ways. 13 has such a way with words. "Right," Aizawa-sensei calls after 13 has finished her upbeat and motivating lecture. He stood silently off to the side and out of the way, letting the pro take charge. Now that that's over, Aizawa-sensei's jaw snaps shut as the lights around them flicker. Izuku whips around to face Oboro, who stares back like a deer caught in the headlights of a vehicle. Izuku's not even sure his ghost friend could do something like that, but he's got no other ideas of what could have gone wrong, especially when the teachers share a glance of confusion. "That's not me," the ghost yelps, hands raised in surrender, and he's right. He's been tucked away in the middle of the crowd of students, nowhere near the light fixtures running along the dome of the building. Oboro doesn't have that kind of power. He can barely interact with the living world besides his chilling presence. Izuku's only ever seen him flicker the lamppost in his bedroom once, and that had taken all his effort. The fountain fizzles out too, the spurts of water stopping entirely. As the excess drips down, it starts back up, water spitting everywhere before slowing again. A vicious cycle that Izuku can't tear his gaze off of it. Something's happening. Also not me. Oboro swallows thickly, weaving around the students to stand at Izuku's side. The chill is welcome as Izuku chances a glance at him as the lights dim drastically. Thankfully, the sun streams in from the dome windows above, or they'd be in pitch black. There's a panicked murmur from the students filling the air, but Izuku's not sure he could open his mouth if he wanted to say anything. It's eerie and silent, even with the mumbles. What the hell? Izuku looks away from where he'd been, doing a subconscious count of everyone to make sure they were all still here, gaze locking on Oboro's shocked one before following the ghost's own gaze. The fountain. What even was that? It was swirls of black and purples. It almost looked pixelated, or perhaps like granules of sand. It swirled with movement, churning from the edges inward. Izuku could do nothing more than stare at it from where they were tucked away by the entrance. There was a dry, bitter taste in his mouth that he distantly realizes as fear. Aizawa-sensei seems to have noticed the fountain doing whatever it was doing as well. Izuku sees the man's sharp movements as he turns, the looks towards him as his body faces the fountain as well. His attention snaps back to the swirling mess of purple and black as he expands like the fire spreading through a dry forest, and then a hand. There's a hand coming out of the center of whatever that thing is. A portal, his mind supplies numbly. That's a portal. There's nothing else it could be. Izuku's never seen a quirk like that, never even heard of something like that existing. He's struck with this new sense of fear as he looks towards his teacher for guidance. "Stay together and don't move," his sensei barks out. It's unlike anything Izuku's heard from him thus far. It's an order, a serious one. He's scared. That's fear souring his tone. 13, protect the students. 13 corrals them all together, jumping into action at the urgency in Sensei's voice. The students are herded together easily enough, shock and fear making them pliable. It's only their third week of school, and no one's heard Aizawa-sensei sound like that before. Whoa, what is that thing? Kirishima's voice breaks Izuku from his thoughts, and his eyes dart back to what had once been the fountain, which is now a solid sheet of menacing black and purple portal. There's a figure stepping out, too far for Izuku to make out any details, and following him is a lot of others. Figure after figure step through the portal, making Izuku's skin prickle with uncertainty. The students crowd together at the edge of the entry platform, gazes locked on the commotion. Wait, has training already started? Kirishima speaking once again, confusion in his voice. Izuku doesn't look at him this time, just keeps his eyes on the people spewing in from the portal. I thought we were rescuing people. Izuku takes a step forward, intending to get a better look. Oboro's pressed so close to him he's unsure their shoulders are overlapping or not. It's so cold that his shoulder has almost gone numb, but the cold is keeping him alert at least. Stay back, Sensei snaps, throwing him a vicious glare that's more fear than anything else. Still, the students freeze like the words had been a quirk of some sort. The man lifts his goggles onto his face and looks back towards the portal. His gaze doesn't waver from the fight when he continues, voice forcing the severity of the situation onto them. This is real. Those are villains. Izuku knows there's talking going on around him, but he's more focused on the fact that the portal just morphed into a person. Sensei is speaking, but Izuku can't register any of the words. Beside him, Oboro had frozen in place, eyes watching the group of villains and jaw agape. His eyes look troubled, and his body wobbles like he's having a hard time staying upright. Izuku wants to ask if he's okay. He doubts anyone will notice him talking to thin air with all of the commotion going on, but when he tried, his mouth feels like cotton. No one's okay, the teen realizes with a start. None of them are, so he shouldn't expect Oboro to be. Where is he? A raspy voice calls. I went through the trouble of bringing so many friends who are here to meet him. They want All Might, the great symbol of peace. I can't believe he's not here. Izuku's attention snaps to a man at the center of the masses. He'd been the first one through. The boss, perhaps? There's a creature-like thing standing behind him, and the void portal making villain as well. Maybe if I kill a few kids, he'll come out to play. The raspy voice sneers indifferently. 13 had put herself between them, Aizawa-sensei and the villains on one side, and the herd of frightened hero course students on the other. Izuku watches as Aizawa-sensei's scarf strikes on his shoulders, hovering threateningly around him in coils. Izuku listens silently as his peers in 13 talk. The alarms aren't going off, and the teachers don't know why. It's an organized attack, and they're left in the dark about whether they're the targets or if the whole school is under attack. Izuku listens half-heartedly as Todoroki talks about the villains, how they're getting in, and how they'd managed to cut off the lights and communications. Using the media as a distraction was clever, but incredibly stupid all the same. The icy hot student had been right about that. They really must have a plan if they're taking the chance to attack a school filled with heroes in training and dozens of pros. 13, get them out of here, and alert the main campus, Sensei tells the other pro fiercely, and anyone would be stupid to review Aizawa-sensei's chilling tone. Actually, if they've got the ability to block our sensors, then they might be jamming out our regular communications as well. Sensei's quiet for just a second before he's addressing Kaminari. Kaminari, try using your quirk to contact the school. Yes, sir. Kaminari ducks his head in a nod, instantly doing as their sensei asked. No. Oh, no. Izuku looks back towards the ghost, noting the loss of chilling presence on his shoulder. Oboro's hands are gripping his hair, pulling nervously. His bottom lip is caught between his teeth, and his face is so pale. Had he not been a ghost, Izuku was sure he would have passed out already. Oboro's panicking instantly sets Izuku on edge. He's going to fight, the ghost wheezes out. Sho's going to fight them. All of them. Alone. God, he can't. There's too many. He'll... Izuku whips his attention to where his teacher looks seconds away from launching into battle. He sucks in a stuttered breath. Oh God, Oboro was right. He really was going to. What are you going to do, Sensei? Izuku begs for Oboro's own sake and as well as Izuku's. You can't fight them on your own. There are dozens of villains. Dozens, at least. Eraserhead is good, but no one's that good. Not even All Might could do it, and he's not even sure All Might in his prime could take on this many villains alone. There's too many for one hero, one person to handle. Sensei looks over at him, glaring over his nose, but Izuku pushes on. There's too many of them. Even if you nullify their quirks, your fighting style's not suited for this. Izuku's shoulders shake, and he's not sure whether it's nerves, fear, or Oboro hovering over his shoulder. Your power works best in stealth and one-on-one fights. It's not going to help you with a group. His teacher regards him carefully behind his goggles. Really, he doesn't do more than angle his head in Izuku's direction, but the teen can feel his teacher's prying eyes on him, even hidden behind the yellow goggles. Izuku knows he probably knows far too much about his teacher's fighting style, especially since he's an underground hero who relies on the element of surprise. But to be fair, he knows a lot about every pro hero he's ever gotten a glimpse at. There's honestly a good few pages on Eraserhead that he'd had before he even knew the man. And even as for studying him up close in his analysis journals, so he knows. He knows this is a losing fight. It's a losing fight to any hero, but someone who relies on stealth and close combat? Worse odds. You can't be a pro if you only have one trick. Izuku's gaze snaps up to his teacher's face as the words sink in. He can do nothing more than stare as his sensei turns away, glancing towards the other pro briefly before continuing. I'll leave it to you, 13. And then he's gone. He jumps down the stairs that lead to the platform where they're stranded, slowly being cornered by criminals and villains. Right now, they're nothing more than sitting ducks, and their only defense is Aizawa-sensei and 13. Aizawa-sensei is a small trio of villains before Izuku can even blink. He's quick and agile like an alley cat. He's almost too quick to keep his gaze on. And Izuku might have even lost him had it not been for his capture weapon flying around him. If it were any other situation, Izuku would be frothing at the mouth. This is so cool. He'd never seen Eraserhead really fight. The dull, grainy CCTV videos that he'd managed to dig up on YouTube didn't do justice to how cool Eraserhead really was and at all. The trio of villains are easily captured in the coils of the scarf, quirks all wiped away by Aizawa-sensei's own. Izuku can only gape as his teacher effortlessly takes out all three by slamming them into one another. He doesn't stop there, instead moving on to the next round of villains stalking in on him. I can't let him go alone. Oboro's voice sounded wrecked. It's hoarse and scared. He's afraid. I can't, Izu. I can't leave him alone like that. I gotta be there. I can't just... What if he... When Izuku turns back to the ghost, he looks torn, like he wants to keep an eye on the students, but desperately wants to tag along with Aizawa-sensei, too. The teen already knows the ghost has an attachment to his teacher, so he's not surprised by it. He's glad someone's going along with his sensei, even if it's just a ghost who sensei doesn't know is there. Izuku doesn't even really know if sensei actually knows Oboro, but either way, he could use a guardian angel standing over his shoulder. "Go," he tells him under his breath. "We'll be okay. Aizawa-sensei shouldn't be alone down there. We have each other. You go to him." The brief glance of thankful relief is short-lived as Oboro gives a serious nod. He blinks out of his existence, and for a second, Izuku panics before he spots the head of blue hair down with his sensei. The ghost is doing nothing more than running through the villains in close proximity to Aizawa-sensei, momentary jolts and shivers distracting them enough to aid Aizawa-sensei a little. Maybe he's not as outnumbered as Izuku thought, not with Oboro on his side. The odds certainly aren't fair, but they're not entirely hopeless either. Izuku stands watching, feeling useless as they fight down below. He wonders how long Oboro will manage to keep going. Oboro can only interact with the human world for so long before he loses his energy. It takes less to interact with a human by means of passing through them than it does to play around with lights or grab a physical object, but he gets tired. It wears him down all the same, just slower, and he's mentioned that it's not a particularly pleasant feeling to phase through someone. This is no time to be analyzing. Izuku's pulled from his thoughts by Ida's urgent voice. When he glances back, his classmates are all running towards the doors with 13. He hadn't even noticed them moving. "We have to go!" With one last look at his sensei and friend, working as an unlikely team only one of them is aware of, the green-haired teen turns on his heels and follows behind Ida. They don't get far when the void portal villain appears in their path. There's no escape. The voice is menacing, deeper than the voice of the person who'd stepped through the portal first. Slowly, the villain loses his human form, void expanding outwards and upwards threateningly. "It's a pleasure to meet you," the voice greets calmly. "It's terrifying. He's terrifying. We're the League of Villains. I know it's impolite, but we decided to invite ourselves into this haven of justice to say hello. And besides, isn't this a fitting place for All Might, symbol of peace, to take his last breath?" Izuku feels his blood run cold at the words. All Might. They're really here for All Might. The teen can only assume that the number one hero isn't here because he'd already worked himself to exhaustion. He couldn't keep up being in his All Might form for long, and certainly not without rest in between. What would have happened if he'd been here too? "I believe he was supposed to be here today," the villain continues, indifference in his tone. He sounds bored, not annoyed or anything. It's an odd tone. Still, at the mention of the number one hero, Izuku and his classmates straightened up, geared for a fight. These villains know too much. They know All Might was supposed to be teaching with Sensei and 13 today. And yet, I see no sign of him. There must have been some sort of change in plans we could not have foreseen. The students don't move a muscle as the void speaks. 13 keeps herself between them, equally as frozen. There's not a lot for them to do, not when faced against someone so powerful. Not on their third week of classes. "Ah, well, in the end, I suppose it doesn't matter. I still have a role to play." The portal stretches up further, the top of his head flickering with like a purple flame as it stretches. Izuku can barely see 13's slow movements out of the corner of his eye. He doesn't want to blatantly look in fear at the villain that will see her moving too, but he also can't not watch what's happening. 13 fiddles subtly with the fingertips of her costume until a flap opens with a barely audible click. She has a plan. Thank God. A growl sounds before 13 can do as she planned. She'd barely managed to lift her finger ready to activate her quirk, and it's a growl that Izuku knows incredibly well. Kachan. That was Kachan. Oh no. The freckled teen's attention jerks up in time to see both Kachan and Kirishima launching at the portal void villain. It's heroic, but oh God, it's stupid. A familiar explosion echoes over the area, the air pooling with a thick smoke. Izuku can't see either of them. He can barely see as the classmates are a step or so in front of him. He can hear Kirishima's voice, cocky in a way it really shouldn't be given the situation. He hears his classmate's voice, but his attention is elsewhere. The portal granules waver through the smoke, drawing Izuku's attention to it. It's slowly regrouping, collecting like it hadn't just been hit with Kachan's full force, and Izuku knows Kachan's full force attack is no walk in the park. It doesn't look damaged in the slightest. No injuries, no pain. His voice doesn't even change. "You live up to your school's reputation," the dark voice calls through the clouds of smoke. The void-like portals wave angrily around the man, and it's the only tell that the villain is annoyed. "But you should be more careful, children." The beady yellow eyes are on whatever this thing is, narrow in annoyance at them. His voice turns hard, tipping from the neutral it had been to a deep, contained anger. "Otherwise, someone might get hurt." "You two!" 13's finger is still arched to use her quirk. "Get out of the way right now!" That seems to just anger the villain more. "I'll scatter you across this facility to meet my comrades and your deaths." The void-like portals shoot out around them, enveloping around them before creeping in and rushing them like a sandstorm. The villain this time harnesses would be astounding if it weren't for the fact that, suddenly, the only thing that Izuku can see is pockets of purple and a black emptiness. He feels weird as it hits him. His stomach churns as a wave of dizzying lightheadedness has him arching forward and protecting his face from stray granules of whatever quirk this guy has with his arms. There are shouts of surprise, screams of terror from his classmates as the void portal engulfs them. He wants to call out to them, but before he can, he's falling. His face is assaulted when he manages to pry his eyes open. He's plummeting into a large body of water. The shipwreck simulation zone, his mind supplies unhelpfully. He'd been warped. It was a warping quirk. Thankfully, he's not alone. He's not sure he would have done if it hadn't been for Sue in that water. And, well, Minetta's there too. By the time Izuku reaches the edge of the water with Tsuyu and Minetta, his fingers had thankfully gone numb. The adrenaline from launching himself into the water with a half-thought plan had been steadily declining, but thankfully there was enough general adrenaline to keep his attention off of his shattered fingers and on the prize, which just so happened to be Aizawa-sensei and Oboro. He's glad Minetta and Tsuyu came along with him to check in, but he knows he would have gone alone, too. He's beyond glad to see them both standing still, exhausted and harrowed. Oboro looks seconds away from collapsing, and there's a translucentness to him that Izuku's never seen before. There's no doubt in Izuku's mind that the ghost had given it his all, gone plus ultra. Similarly, Aizawa-sensei's breaths are haggard. He's still standing, but he's fighting. His scarf flies widely against the villains, trapping and taking them out one at a time when they get too close, or test their luck against him. He's tired. Izuku can see it in the way that his body subconsciously slouches whenever there's a second or so without a villain, stepping toward him to fight or try to take him out. He bounces right back into the fight easily, but he's definitely wearing out. They watch for a second, hidden behind the ledge separating the water from the pavement where Aizawa-sensei is fighting. Izuku sees the man with hands covering his arms, sides back, head and face charging for their teacher, and a small part of him wants to shout a warning at Aizawa-sensei, but the man is too good at being a pro. He whips around to the hand-covered man, scarf flicking out in attempt to capture him. They're talking. Izuku can see lips moving, almost hear voices, but he can't make anything out. He watches as the villain grabs fistfuls of Aizawa-sensei's scarf, predicting his attacks. Izuku's heart hammers in his chest as he watches the villain get too close. Oboro is forcing himself into action, charging at the villain when his hand settles on his teacher's elbow. "Shit!" the ghost gasps, freezing at Aizawa-sensei's side like he doesn't know what to do. How to help? "Oh shit, no, that's not good. Sho, that's not good. Get away, get off of him." Izuku can see what's been done to Aizawa-sensei. Well, not really, but he knows it's nothing good. The ghost lets out a growl of anger as he dives through the villain, still holding their sensei in place. But there's no effect on him. He doesn't shiver or shake or anything. The only one who ends up trembling is Oboro. He wobbles on his feet, seeming to barely manage to keep himself up. The ghost lets out a cry of frustration and... Wait, is Oboro crying? "Shit!" the ghost screams, and Izuku's not sure whether it's agony or fear or just sheer frustration at his lack of usefulness in helping Aizawa-sensei. The ghost forces himself up straight, though Izuku can see his body shaking, hands dragging down his face stressfully. "Shit, shit, shit! No, this isn't happening. It's not ending like this." Almost as if Sensei heard the ghost calls, he manages to pry away from the villain and jump away gracefully, now clutching at his clearly injured elbow. His costume sleeve has been ripped away, leaving his elbow exposed. It's red and broken, almost looking like shattered shards of glass, but it's not bleeding. It's the work of a quirk, but not a quirk Izuku's ever seen before. He's still managing to dodge everything, even as his arm dangles uselessly at his side. More villains have appeared, all circling around him. Oboro inches back, stood shoulder to shoulder with Aizawa-sensei. He sucks in an unsteady breath. They both do, but they're still going. The villain is talking. It sounds distant to Izuku's ears, almost like he's speaking softly, so only Sensei can hear him. He wonders what's being said, but if the look on Oboro's face is anything to go off, it's not pleasant. Even injured, his sensei continues to fight. He doesn't back down. The villains close in on him, but he just keeps going, flinging his capture weapon with his good hand and using his agile close contact attacks with his legs. He's starting to get sloppy, but who wouldn't? He's been at this for however long, and he's just taken serious damage to his elbow, making his arm virtually useless. "Look at you," the villain covered in hands says, excited, in a dull, uninterested kind of way, voice just loud enough so Izuku can hear it too. "You're still standing. You really are so cool." There's a pause, Oboro taking sloppy steps to stand beside Aizawa-sensei. "Oh, and by the way, hero," the villain teases. Oboro jolts at Aizawa-sensei's side, whirling around to face the huge, towering creature that had swiftly settled behind him unnoticed. Izuku gasps at the same time that Oboro takes a shocked step back, finally losing his balance and falling onto his ass. "I'm not the final boss." Izuku can't tear his attention away, as the creature's bulky hand rises, catching on Aizawa-sensei's head. He can't tear his attention away, but the only thing he hears is Oboro's hoarse screams as he scrambles to his feet, launching another futile attempt at stalling the enemy. The screams turn to cries as the creature grabs Aizawa-sensei's head, squeezing it as if it were nothing more than a stress ball. It's almost effortless. That creature's strength is unmatched by anyone here right now. The sheer force of it has Aizawa-sensei's goggles cracking, flying off his head in pieces, blood dripping from it. Oboro screams out again, cries, crawls towards Aizawa-sensei. "Oh God, Sensei!" The creature slams his head around as if it weighs nothing more than a ragdoll, smashing his head against the ground repeatedly, all the while Oboro tries desperately to help, clawing, kicking, slapping, all of which phase right through the creature. The attempts are futile. Nothing deters the creature in the slightest. Izuku feels like he can't breathe. The three of them, students who have only been training for 2 weeks, can do nothing more than watch as their sensei is tortured before their eyes. They're frozen in fear. If these guys took out Aizawa-sensei so easily, then 3 uneducated students have no shot at winning. It would be walking into their own graves, even with one for all. Izuku recoils with a wince as the creature snaps Aizawa-sensei's arm like a twig. He's not sure if Aizawa's yells of pain are worse or Oboro's screams of desperation are. They both make his stomach churn. The creature is holding Sensei down, sitting on him to keep him down while his hands work at breaking their teacher's bones. The villain, covered in hands, watches from a distance and he's talking. Izuku can't hear what he's saying over his own pounding heart, but he's watching Oboro's expression grow angrier and angrier. His lip curls, body vibrating with something different than overexertion, as his hands clench into trembling at his side. "No, no," Mineta whimpers at Izuku's side, but he barely even hears that. "I can't watch this anymore. We should be getting out of here super fast, shouldn't we?" Izuku knows that's what they should do, that they should leave. Aizawa-sensei would want them to go. He wanted them safe, wouldn't want them sent away with 13, as if he hadn't. Oboro had wanted him to go with his class. He couldn't control one for all. He's no help to anyone if he hurts himself to the point that he's sitting prey to the villains. But it feels so wrong. Aizawa-sensei had been trying to help him since that first day. Their conversation from just that morning, how attentive and uncharacteristically soft as they talked about additional quirk training and counseling. It wasn't right to leave now, to leave his teacher in that state, without hope. But he just can't force himself to move, not to help or to leave. He's just frozen. He watches with wide, unblinking eyes as the warping villain returns to the hand side of the villain's side. He can't see either of their mouths, but he's almost unsure of what they're saying, but he knows they're talking. The creature doesn't move off of Aizawa-sensei, hand still forcing his teacher's face into the cracked ground below. He's not moving. Sensei hasn't so much as twitched. Izuku thinks the worst for a second, only to remember that if Aizawa-sensei was dead, Oboro would probably not be as unexpressive as he is. He should only panic when Oboro panics, right? Izuku! The green-haired boy jerks his attention up at the desperate call of his name. He must have been lost in his thoughts, because when he tries to glance at Oboro, who called him, his gaze instantaneously snaps to the hand villain who's launching at them, fingers spread and ready to grasp. Damn it, watch out! He's headed right for Tsuyu. He's so close to her. Izuku can see in his vision that his friend crumbling to the dust like Aizawa-sensei's elbow had. He's still locked, frozen in fear. He tries to prompt his muscles on, to unlock his knees and joints, but nothing works. All he can do is follow the villain's hand as his fingers touch onto Sue's face, and nothing. Oh, thank God. Izuku hears the voice, sounding far away and almost foreign, despite Oboro's voice being so close now, like he'd sprinted behind the villain when he'd caught on to what was planning. Izuku wants to look over at the ghost, but is unable to turn away from Tsuyu and the villain. That was too close, the ghost wheezes out. The villain seems surprised for just a second before he's turning to look back at Aizawa-sensei, and it's just then that Izuku connects the dots that Aizawa-sensei had canceled out the villain's quirk before he could touch Tsuyu. You really are so cool, the hand-covered man tuts, Eraserhead. Damn right he is, Oboro snarls, shooting a pained look back at where Aizawa-sensei is barely managing to keep himself conscious, lids flickering in exhaustion and pain, but remaining open like his life depends on it. Well, maybe not his life, but someone's life. Izuku winces as the creature slams Sensei's head down again, cutting off his eye contact and no doubt forcing his eyes shut again. He takes that moment of opening to launch into a punch. There's not going to be a better opportunity. He's not going to get many openings. He needs to do something. He can't just watch anymore. Not while his classmates are facing death and his sensei is smooshed into the ground like a wad of chewing gum. He's prepared to break himself, if it means rescuing those around him. He'll gladly take the lose if it means everyone else wins. No one's dying. It's not happening. He won't let it happen. Zuko's beyond surprised when he lands his punch, but his arm doesn't shatter. There's no pain, nothing. Maybe that little practice he'd had in training had actually helped. But then the smoke of the punch clears, and he takes a stuttered breath when he realizes he'd punched the creature, not the villain. And it did nothing to him. Zuko's attack on the creature was just as futile as Oboro's, and it doesn't make sense. How? How had it done nothing? He knows it worked. He had used One for All. He'd felt it in his veins, had seen how the force of it whipped any villain in the vicinity away, rippled the water around him, and distantly shattered any lights close to him, but there was no damage on the creature. You're pretty powerful, the villain calls from behind the creature. This smash of yours. Are you one of All Might's disciples? Doesn't matter. I'm done with you now. The creature's eyes had been angled to the side, like he was trying to glance at the villain behind him, but when the words left the hand villain's mouth, his eyes flickered back to Izuku. The creature grabbed him before he could move, fists tightening around Izuku's arm like a vice. Izuku! Oboro shrieks in panic. He paused at the edge of the water when Sensei had erased the villain's quirk, but now he was throwing himself into the water with urgency, the currents not moving at all with his steps. No! All Izuku could see was the creature's second hand coming towards him. Out of the corner of his eye, he can see the villain's hand aiming for both Sue and Mineta. It feels like time had slowed down. All he could do was cower as the hand pushed closer. Oboro was still calling out to him, pleading and begging. Izuku forced his eyes shut when the hand was just inches away from his face. He didn't want to see it when it finally came. The same fate as Aizawa-sensei. He felt a hand on his shoulder, gripping hard. Desperately, he wondered briefly who'd gotten to him, who would see his demise just from behind him. What the hell is this? Izuku forced his eyes open at that call. The villain's voice was curled with frustrated confusion. The teen gaped as his eyes located the source of the confusion. Smoke. Where had all this smoke come from? It pooled in around them like it had suddenly appeared, and before Izuku knows it, he can't see anything through it. Wait, that's not smoke. It's white and almost fluffy, filling in around them quickly and separating everyone. It's thick but not suffocating. He can breathe just fine despite it being encased. What is this? Which one of these brats has a quirk like this? The villain snapped in annoyance. Nomu, Kurogiri, where are you two? The creature, Nomu, Izuku thinks, had paused in confusion. The teenager can't see its hand coming at him anymore, can't see its bulking body, but he's still gripping his arm like a vice. Izuku takes a moment of confusion to tear his arm away, activating One for All just enough so that he can break the grip it has on him. The fingers clutching his forearm give it away in surprise, and a jolt of pain climbs up his arm, but he doesn't have time to dwell on it because suddenly he's being tugged backwards. He's pulled away from the creature, stumbling over his own feet. There's still a grip on his shoulder, but now there's a second grip on his wrist, tight but protective instead of threatening. The hand on his wrist leads him away, but the hand on his shoulder doesn't falter, just squeezes tighter. Izuku still has no idea what's going on. What had just happened? 1 second he was looking death in the eye, and the next he's enveloped in a fluffy cloud like, well, he's not even sure what this is. What? The teen breathes out, the hand not being gripped, reaching out to wave through the strange texture surrounding them. It's just then that he realizes someone's grabbing him. He's being clutched. Whoever's behind him lets out a stuttered breath. Zuko whips his head around to look at whoever's holding on to him, ready to throw down with some villain, but the fight promptly drains out of him when he catches eyes with Oboro's own. Oboro? Zuko gasps in surprise. What? I mean, what? How? What is this? I don't know, the ghost whines out. I don't know. I don't know what's happening. I feel you. I'm touching you, but I'm not supposed to. I haven't... Oboro, what is this? My quirk, the ghost chokes out, gripping Izuku only tighter. Cloud, it's my quirk, but I don't... How is this happening? I mean, I can't be. I panicked, Izu, but this isn't... It's impossible. This was Oboro's quirk. Oboro, the ghost who he'd managed to befriend, had just used his quirk in the real world, the living world. Izuku could see it. The villains could see it. This truly wasn't possible. My friends, Izuku gasps out, brushing aside the fact that the smoke, these clouds, came from Oboro. He could analyze that later, but for now, he needs to make sure that his classmates and teachers are okay. They were in trouble. And Sensei, God, what about Sensei? They're safe. Oboro bows his head before he's angling his chin upwards. He doesn't look like he wants to take his hands away to the point upwards yet, now that they're solid against Izuku. Your friends, they're up there. Izuku angles his head where he sees 2 sturdy clouds supporting both Mineta and Tsuyu. Mineta is cowering, but Tsuyu's face is peeking over the edge of the cloud. He can hardly see them, but he's sure that they can't see him through the dense clouds. He can only gape up at them for a second before he realizes they're also on a cloud. Izuku throws his spare hand back, suddenly feeling unsteady. It slaps against Oboro's hip, and they both jolt in surprise. How are we? I don't know. Okay, Izuku blows out a steadying breath. Okay, and Sensei? Oboro bites his lip. Less okay and in need of serious medical attention, but he's hidden. There's a thick cloud surrounding him, and it'll only part for your classmates or the pro teachers. Even if the villains try to get to them, they'll barely be able to see their hand in front of their own faces. Wow, okay. Izuku forces another breath because he's sure he keeps forgetting to breathe. You make clouds. I make clouds, the ghost snorts in agreement. That's pretty cool. Izuku eyes his friend without moving away or pulling back at all. Oboro doesn't feel cold, nor does he feel warm. He feels solid, though, and it's nice. It's nice to be able to touch him for once, and even if he's got no idea what's going on, or why it's happening. You're not wearing your Yuuei uniform. Huh? Oboro looks down at himself, surprised to see the clothes he's wearing. They're blue, like martial arts robes. Atop of that is a brown bomber flight jacket with a fuzzy collar. He's wearing an aviator hat, but still has his fluffy cloud-like hair showing, and he's got goggles like Aizawa Sensei's, just instead of yellow, they're gray with yellow indentations. I haven't seen this in so long, the boy whispers in awe. It's my hero costume. Zuko cocks an eyebrow in surprise. Studying the student closer, he'd only ever seen Oboro in the same Yuuei uniform. It's both incredibly strange yet endearing at the same time to see him in something else. Suits you. The green-haired boy shrugs with a smile. Thanks, Izu. Oboro snorts a laugh. Wish I could say the same to you, but I don't dig the All Might-inspired ears on your bunny costume. Green is your color, though. Hey! Zuko tries to be offended, but ends up laughing. How do you know they're All Might-inspired? How do people not know? Oboro fires back with a grin. All right, I yield. Izuku shakes his head, having no further argument. So, how do we get Mineta and Tsuyu down? And, how do we get down? Good question. Oboro bites his lip. We could drop the purple one to the floor. He's kind of a pervert, but, I don't know. It feels weird this time. I mean, I haven't used my quirk in so long, but it's like I don't have full control. I can lower them down, but I don't know how well I'll be able to guide the clouds with no physical form. You can't drop my classmate onto the floor from that high up. It's basically assault, Zuko huffs out in answer to Oboro's first proposal. He's not a fan of Mineta, but he's still a classmate. Try lowering them away from the villains, and take us down right there. I want to hang by Aizawa-sensei, and I know you do too. The cloud-haired boy gives a steady nod, looking up at the two clouds holding his classmates above the chaos. They move slowly, descending away from where they'd last seen the villains. Simultaneously, Izuku's own cloud starts dropping slowly as well. Oboro is incredibly focused, hand clutching Izuku's wrist and holding him tight, while the other on his shoulder has moved as if directing the clouds with it. Honestly, this quirk is insane, and Izuku can't even begin to imagine what Oboro could have possibly done with it when he was alive. They're almost on the ground when there's a smash like the door had been blown in the direction of the entryway where they'd all gotten separated. Help. Thank God, help has arrived. The pros were finally here. Izuku winces at the noise of explosion, and Oboro staggers back in surprise. Izuku feels the ghost's hand leave his wrist, and suddenly he's falling. It's not far. It's enough that he'll be sore later. When he opens his eyes, the clouds are gone. All of them. It's like they hadn't existed in the first place. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, could see Tsuyu and Mineta pulling themselves up off the ground at a safe distance away, he wouldn't have believed it. He has a view of the villains again. The decay quirk gone, one, and the warping one, and the one they'd called Nonmu. Finally, the one covered in hands drawled as a sigh after glancing in Izuku's direction. That's over with. Looks just like one of you brats stuck around. Aizawa-sensei is left defenseless now, without the clouds for cloaking and protection, but thankfully the attention is on Izuku and not him. He hadn't moved, but he's still breathing. Those odds were as good as any when it came to the damage that he'd received. Still, he needed help, and fast. Oboro was looking worse for the wear, but still kneeling beside Aizawa-sensei. Talking to him so softly, Izuku couldn't pick up on what he was saying. Sensei remained lifeless at the ghost's side, but Oboro wasn't freaking out, so he wasn't dead, Izuku hoped. He'd be worried, but have no fear, students, All Might's voice projects from the entrance of the USJ. I am here. The decayed quirk villain grins, swiveling around to stare up at All Might. Izuku and his sensei forgotten now that a bigger target has arrived. After all this waiting, the heroic piece of trash shows up. All Might moves like a flash, taking out the villains in his path. As he makes his way to Aizawa-sensei, he kneels down, Oboro shuffling out of the way with a thankful yet uncertain expression, as All Might lifts Aizawa-sensei into his arms. Izuku can barely blink as All Might grabs him too, even going so far as to grab Tsuyu and Mineta too, who were a bit further away before launching back and settling both of them down. Oboro had popped up beside Aizawa-sensei as well. Everyone back to the entrance, All Might demands. And bring Aizawa with you. He doesn't have much time. Shota tastes blood after the third or maybe fourth time the creature slams his head into the concrete. His body aches. The pain is unimaginable. He can hardly breathe as the creature grounds his face into the ground. His arms are useless now, his head thrumming with pain, and his eyes have long since gone blurry. But he pushes through. The second he sees that decay-quirked villain, the leader, running at his kids, he knows he can't just lie there and wait for the worst. He focuses his attention up, using all of his strength to activate his own quirk, just as the villain touches all 5 fingers around Sue's face. His face gets jammed further into the crumbles of the concrete, and it hurts to the point that everything goes numb. He can hear the altercation of the fight between his students and the villains over the sound of his own lulling heartbeat. He's so tired, but the moment that he feels the creature's hand off his head, its whole presence gone, he manages to barely lift his head, just in time to see the creature reaching for Midoriya. He's got a hold on him, and the other hand is going for his head. Shota wants to get up. He wants to help, but he can't force himself up. He can barely keep his eyes open, and can barely keep his gaze steady on the fight. His heart jumps into his throat when someone suddenly appears behind Midoriya. A villain is his first thought. Oh God, Midoriya was going to die. First that creature aiming to do Midoriya what it had already done to himself, and then this unknown villain taking the opportunity to attack as well. But that's not right. The longer he stares, the clearer it gets. The haze in his eyes, clearly, momentarily, and that... No, it's impossible. It can't be. He must have died at some point, because it's Oboro. Looking young as the day he died, just as Shota forces himself to remember his friend. He's there, and he's touching Midoriya. He's there, but he's not. Even at this distance, the man can see the translucence of the teenager that he'd once known. He's seeing things. He must really be dying, or he really is already dead. You don't just randomly start seeing the ghost of your dead best friend. It's impossible. Illogical. Insane, even. Shota blinks his eyes for a long second to see if the ghost of his school friend was just an optical illusion. His tired eyes and dying brain playing tricks on him. He's a man of logic, and that seeing his long-dead high school best friend is certainly not logical. He's so tired. The figure, Oboro, is still standing behind his student when he opens his eyes again. All logic has gone out the window. He's tired and so confused, and he's almost certain that he's not really seeing Oboro. This has to be in his head. There's literally no way that Oboro can be there. The last thing that Shota sees before he loses his battle with consciousness is a heavy cloud enveloping around him. It's so familiar, it hurts, but so incredibly foreign to him that he wants to cry. This concludes Chapter 5 of Yuuei Survival Guide. Hope you guys are still enjoying this one. There was a lot of action in there with the USJ. As always, thank you guys so much for listening.